So when we're subtracting fractions, it follows the same procedure. Hopefully spell it somewhat right. I think there's a double C in there, right? Maybe not. Okay, I don't think so. All right, so it follows the same procedure as adding, where we're needing to create a common denominator, okay, before subtracting the numerators. So again, we're doing the same as we did prior ones, but now we need to create a common denominator. Now, normally we'll have the first number is bigger than the second. Once we get into integers a little later, then we'll start maybe changing up a little bit. But for right now, the first number should be bigger than the second number. All right, 3 over 4. So 3/4 and 1/2, these are not the same denominator. We need to make them the same. Well, one way would be to multiply both by the opposite number. So multiply this by 2 and multiply that by 4. But we also know that if we multiply this first one just by 2, it'll make it 4. So we don't actually have to do anything to the second one. If we can do that, it makes it just a little bit simpler. So what we have is 3/4 minus, now 1 times 2 is 2, and 2 times 2 is 4, so it'll be 3/4 minus 2/4. 3 minus 2 is 1, and the bottom is going to stay the same, and that is in lowest terms, right? So we make sure it's in lowest terms. Now, just to show you as a quick little example, if we were to, let's say, multiply this one by 2 and multiply this one by 4, this would be 6 over 8, subtract 4 over 8, okay, which might look a little different, but when you do 6 minus 4, we get 2, and that is 2 over 8. Now, 2 over 8, we can simplify by dividing both of them by 2. And so this would give us 1 over 4, which you may notice is exactly the same as we got before. But in the first one, we didn't have to simplify it, whereas the second time we did. Okay? So remember, we want to make sure that our answers are in simplest form. So if we can make it a little easier to start or not do as much to start, it might make it easier in the end. But we still need to make sure that we have common denominators. 1/2 minus 1/5. Here's another example. Okay, 1/2, so 2 and the 5 are not the same. The only way to make 2 and 5 the same is to multiply by the opposite. So multiply by 5, multiply by 2. And so that means that we will have 5 over 10 minus 2 over 10. Now we have the same, okay? And 5 over 10 is an equivalent fraction to 1/2, and 2 over 10 is an equivalent fraction to 1/5. 5 minus 2 is 3, and our denominator stays the same. This cannot be divided any farther, so that right there will be in lowest terms. Number 2, 3/4, 2/5. 4 and 5, not the same. Okay, there doesn't happen to be anything that we can multiply to make them something, or sorry, we multiply by the opposite because it's of the way they are. Okay, it just there's nothing small that we can do. The lowest common denominator is going to be multiplied by the opposite in this case. So 3 times 5 is 15 over 20, and 8 over 20. Now we have a common denominator there, so we subtract. 15 minus 8 is 7, and the 20 stays the same because we're still dealing in 20ths. Okay. We're still dealing 20th, we're just left with 7 of them now. Instead of having 15 and we're subtracting 8, we're left with 7 to make 7/20ths. All right, last example here, we have an 8 and a 4. Now if we multiply them by the opposite, then we get 32. But 8 and 4 can actually go into a couple other numbers. They can both go into 8, both go into 16, both go into 24. Well, you get the idea, there's quite a few that they can. But instead, we can just make this an 8 by multiplying that one by 2, and that can stay the same. Again, we're just looking at making the denominators the same, but we have to multiply the entire fraction by that number. So the 7 over 8 is going to stay the same. 2 times 1 is 2. 4 times 2 is 8. Now we have a common denominator. 7 minus 2 is 5. 5 over 8 is our smallest possible, or our simplest fraction. So that means that that is our final answer. Now, I have a couple questions for subtracting fractions. So that's questions number 6 and 8 from the assignment. You can take a look at those.